Have you ever thought, I really, really want to sell my artwork, but I don't know how to price it, and I've just been kind of guessing this whole time and hoping something lands, something sticks? Or perhaps you're like, I've had my artwork up for sale for ages and no one's buying it. What am I doing wrong? Today I'm going to show you how to price your artwork. Art is a huge umbrella. It's not just drawings, it's not just prints, it's original oil paintings, it's abstract work, it's landscapes, it's portraits of people, of dogs, of houses. There are so many factors to consider when you're pricing your artwork, and we have to go through them all to find out what's going to work for your work. Grab a sketchbook, grab your pencil, and let's dive into it. This is brushwork. Before we dive into how to price your work, we really need to focus on what it is exactly your work is. Is it botanical? Is it landscape? Is it abstract? Is it something that can also be used as something else, like your artwork on a cup, or your artwork on a shower curtain, or your artwork as a print? When you start to define what it is that you are making, that you're trying to sell, you're gonna have a lot easier time selling it in the first place because you'll know how to define what it is. Today I've got 4 pricing structures for you that I've used to sell my fine art oil paintings. I make abstract geometric oil paintings. I sell them to offices, to private homes, to collections, and the pricing structures that I've used over the years have really evolved with my work. And that's something that I want to get straight out the gate. You're not going to find a pricing structure and it's going to work for all time. That's very rare. In fact, I've gone through all 4 of these and they've evolved with me as my work has gotten better and as I've understood the market that I'm actually trying to reach. Be adaptable. Try things out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, get rid of it and move on, okay? We're not getting emotionally attached to a pricing structure here. I've got 4 different pricing structures for you to consider, plus details on their pros and cons and whether or not they're going to work for your art. We will cover sales and shipping and what to do if you sell your art in multiple spaces. Maybe that's in person, maybe it's on 2 different websites. We're going to cover all that too. This is price based on competition or comparison. I was first drawn to competition-based pricing when I was selling artwork on Etsy. Etsy is a great platform for things that you sell over and over again. Any sort of e-commerce site like that is going to work out in your favor. At the time that I was selling on Etsy, I was selling handmade sketchbooks. These books were Coptic bound, they had sketchbook quality pages, and they were cute little books that I loved to draw in personally. I had that sort of emotional need of I wanted a sketchbook that was perfect for my needs, and then once I found it, I was like, I gotta sell these. What's really important to note about a sketchbook is that it's a product more than fine art. It's still artwork in that sense that I made it with my hands and it's something interesting and beautiful, but it's something that can be used. It's a tool. And I think that's really important when you're thinking about selling things online. Alongside of these sketchbooks, I was also selling my original artwork. And I had some portraits up there that were very brightly colored, they were interesting, they were of famous people. The biggest problem I had on Etsy was getting people to actually click on my listings. Because I had a product-based item, people were looking at other sketchbooks, these people who were my clients, and looking at the price. They were thinking, all right, Stephanie's sketchbooks that are beautiful and they're handmade, they're $75 for a little sketchbook like this because it took her that many hours to make it, versus this other one that has a similar looking paper and beautiful pages is $35. Nobody was clicking on my listings because I wasn't looking at the competitive pricing. And that's a big problem when you're making a bunch of sketchbooks, when you're making a bunch of a product. The minute I dropped my price down to $34 per sketchbook, my sales started happening. The minute I started looking at the competition and basing my prices off of that, that's when sales started coming in, and that's when I was like, oh, I'm feeling successful as a sketchbook maker. It was something I was doing, and it was great. However, it had some downsides. One of them is I wasn't getting paid as much money as the effort I was putting in to make these sketchbooks. my labor of love was being undermined. And that's one of the biggest flaws for comparative pricing. Another thing you have to really think about with comparative pricing is that what is the thing that you're selling? Let's go back to fine art. If you're selling house portraits, if you're selling dog portraits, things that are more customizable, it's going to be really easy for you to find comparative prices for things. There's some pet portraitists out there who have the price down per dog, per image. Like, it's so specific, and they've got a great system and make something like $100,000 a year on Etsy doing these pet portraits. It's kind of insane. If you ever want to just have your mind blown for how much money you can make with art, you should go look at pet portraitists. They're wild. They're wild. But let's say you do something like abstraction, or you do something more with collage and it's like really unique pieces. Finding the comparison for your work is often impossible. Sometimes you can't find the quality that's the same, the size that's the same, the amount of hours it took. People don't usually write down how many hours it took them to make something. When you're searching for your competition, it's really hard to find an accurate portrayal of what it is that they're making. You have to base it off their photos, off their description. Maybe they have a video, usually not. It gets tricky, so finding an accurate price of what people are selling theirs at, it's not always possible. Here's the pros and cons. It's great for high demand art product types. We're talking mugs, rugs, blankets, pillows, things with your art on it, art licensing stuff, perfect for that. It's great for customizable things, pet portraits, pictures of people's houses to paint when they buy a new place, just any kind of real commission that is really customizable. It's great for that. This is great for prints and anything you can sell multiples of, and it's really good for keeping things aligned with what everyone else is doing. This is also pretty good for beginners. If you are just starting to sell your artwork and you're trying to figure out, what do I sell my picture for? Having comparative pricing can give you some kind of base, whereas before you're just like, I don't know, I have no idea. Is it $2? Is it $200? Is it $2,000? Like, who knows? Not you. So doing that kind of base research of what is everyone else doing could be great. It also has a lot of buyer appeal. Remember when I said when I dropped my prices of my sketchbooks, they started selling like hotcakes? That's really handy. But it also leads us to our cons list, which is if you keep your prices with the competition, you can bring each other down. Seller A sets the price at $34, seller B sets it at $33, and they just keep going down and down and down and down until they're basically in the red trying to sell their things because that's what the market is demanding because they've pushed all of their sales down. This can also go the other way by pricing things up and way too high, but that's not as often the case. You are constantly comparing yourself to other artists just based off the cost alone, not only when you're seeing a bunch of other art that looks kind of like yours. You introduce a lot of self-doubt, and this system can be a pretty big struggle if you have any self-doubt around your art just at all, so just be warned for that. And the last thing about comparative pricing is that if you drop your price down too low to be competitive at market price, some people can think if the price is too low, then it's cheap and not good. There's this idea around buying jewelry that has stuck with me for years, and that is if I see a ring that's sterling silver and it's beautiful and I like it, but if I see the price is under $25, I'm not going to get it because I think it's made out of cheap stuff. The same thing goes for art. If you make your price too low, people can think, oh, this is just a bunch of garbage. And they're not going to get it. But if you'd raise the price by $50, that ring suddenly became $75 sterling silver ring that was already beautifully aesthetic. I'm going to be like, oh, this is a great quality ring. And I'm probably going to want to buy it more because it has a better price point. The psychology of buying is so interesting. My second pricing system is a formula. And one I learned from an interior designer that was kind of my mentor for a while, right after college. I had been entering the field of office art, trying to make art for conference rooms and selling it in bulk to different spaces to really make a cohesive feel in an office space. It was very fun, and I kind of miss doing jobs like that. Maybe I'll get back to it soon. But she taught me this system. Price equals time plus materials plus 20%. This is a really common formula. It's used for a lot of things, and I think you should give it a go. It feels very professional to use this system. It takes quite a bit of work to start into it, but you can do this. The system is really, really good for giving estimates to potential clients and truly knowing what your materials are worth. Here's an example on how to use it, and this is one that I personally used 8 years ago. I had a painting commission for an office space. It was 3 feet by 5 feet. It was an oil painting. It was huge, right? It took me about $140 worth of my studio time. It took me 32 hours to make this painting. I had been renting a studio at the time, and my price for that kept going up and up. I forgot what it was exactly at that point. The material cost for that 3 by 5 foot painting was about $220 with the canvas, with the paint, with the materials, with everything. What you have to do when you choose this system is estimate the cost per use for everything in your studio. That's brushes, your easel, the studio space itself, your benches, and your everything, your apron, whatever it is. You have to estimate that cost. So this is kind of how I figured out that cost. And for this, we're going to use a tube of Gamblin white paint. A 37 milliliter tube of titanium white oil paint costs $7.80 from Gamblin as of September 2024. That's 21 cents per milliliter. If I used half that tube for a 3 by 5 foot painting, which would actually be more, but half the tube is $4 in materials there. So you then have to do that calculation for every single color you're using on the painting. You might be weighing how much paint you put down. This is a great way to get really precious about materials. I don't know if I really suggest this one, but you would know. You would know. This would be good for people who don't have a lot of variety in material. Like maybe you do sumi ink drawings. You got the ink and your brushes and paper, right? And those are your 3 main materials. But for oil paint, I have a bag of paint down there, and I'm like, there's like 70 colors in there. It's a lot. It's a lot. So after that, you have to think about your time. In Seattle, the $15 minimum wage wasn't really a thing, and at the time that I made this painting. And so I thought, okay, so my part-time job teaching horseback riding lessons, which is something I did for many years, that paid me $12 an hour. So I was like, what if we do $11 for this, for my painting? So that would have been $352 for the 32 hours at $11 an hour. Plus the material cost was a total of $572, plus 20% was $686.40 as the total for this 3 by 5 foot painting. So when I look at this hourly right now, I'm like, that's actually too little for that big of a painting. 3 by 5 feet, it's a lot. But when I got that advice to use this system, I hadn't been making paintings full time yet. I was still doing part-time work, and I was only a couple years out of art school. I had very little confidence in my work, and I had a very hard time selling any paintings for more than $250. That number, 600 plus, felt wildly overpriced for what I was making. It's a bummer, but I moved my hourly rate down all the way from $11 to $1.75 per hour. I ended up selling that painting for $275. A 3 by 5 foot painting for $275. Saying that out loud is just like, what was I doing? But at that time, that was a win for my art. I had never made that much for a painting that big before, and it was really like that was a win. That was successful. So here's a pros and cons list of the materials plus time plus 20%. You're going to know exactly how much each of your materials is worth. You're going to know how much you get paid an hour, even if it's depressing at $1.75. You're going to get really objective about it. You're going to have a very straightforward answer for when someone is like, how much would this cost? You'll get good at estimating how long things take you to do. And you are going to ensure that your time and expenses really get covered. That's fantastic, right? So what are the downsides? You might get paid $2 or less an hour for your work at the beginning, because when you look at it, you look at the price and you're just like, I don't know if I can charge for that or if anyone would pay for that, especially when you're starting out, you have no history behind you. That's rough. It's going to take a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of like math to calculate your materials. I recommend doing a 4 to 6 month stint of averages for how many paintings you make and how much your materials cost over that, doing a more simple division, but you can go as far as charting out every single ounce of every single paint you have, and that might work out for you. This formula might not really work for market value and your emotional value to the pricing. I feel like pricing artwork is emotional, and You have to be really conscious of what you're doing because it might just feel wrong. We'll get into that in a second. Your overhead expenses should be covered by that 20%, but it might not cover your photography, it might not cover your marketing, it might not cover your website hosting, it might not cover those things, and that can fall behind when you're doing this kind of pricing. The last thing is, if you're doing highly detailed, smaller work that still takes you, 32 hours to do, but it's an 8x10 piece, the pricing can feel weird there, and you have to consider that. This leads us to our next pricing structure. This is intuition-based pricing. I learned this from a professor at art school. Intuition-based pricing is looking at a finished painting and thinking, okay, I'm just going to say a price out loud and judge if that feels too high or too little until it feels right. So I'm looking at a painting, I'm like, it's 18 by 24 inches. I'm going to say $200. And maybe that feels too low. So then I'm going to go up to $800. I'm like, that's too high for this painting. That's too high. So then I go down and I'm like, $455. That feels right. And that's how you price your work. And I'm not kidding. I used this pricing structure for 5 years, maybe longer. The pros is that it's really easy to use this. You just start saying numbers out loud until it feels right. The cons is this is a great way to not get paid for the quality of your work. If you have doubts about your work and its worth, you are going to constantly, chronically underpay yourself, and that's going to be harsh. It's going to be not good. You're also going to have a hard time being consistent with your prices at all, and remembering what things are priced at over, many years of making art. It's going to get wonky unless you're like diligently writing it down. And if you're ever giving a proposal to someone where they want, say, 5 paintings from you, this is going to get weird because you're going to say, oh yeah, they want 7 paintings. I feel like $2,000 is good for that. And then you're like, $2,000 for 7 paintings? That's a lot of paintings. That's not enough. That's not enough per painting. That's not good. But you might not think about that unless someone's saying it to your face. I used the intuition-based painting prices for so many years. I used it as my rents got raised. I used it as my material costs got higher and higher. And I didn't adjust my prices with the rising cost of materials because I always thought this 18 by 24 inch painting is always worth $250. And over the years, that just doesn't make sense for material wise. And also my skills got better. And also I had more education. And also I just the paintings were just better in every way. I really think it's better to use materials plus time plus 20% rule if you're considering intuition-based pricing. But at the same time, maybe a hybrid works. Maybe you work like I did before, where I was like $11 an hour is too much for this painting because I've never sold a painting for more than this cost. I've never sold a painting for over $500 before. You're never gonna find out if you don't price it for over $500. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you don't go for the lottery ticket, you're not gonna win the lottery. The pros and cons of intuition-based pricing is this. You're gonna feel really good about your price when you put it out there. That's a pro. It's gonna be really flexible. You're going to have no rules about the pricing, and so you'll have a lot of just ability to be like, oh yeah, I can do a discount here and a plus there and whatever. You can quickly change your pricing to match the market. And say you do some comparative research and you're like, oh, I should drop my prices now so it competes with this other one. But in the long run, you might be losing money unknowingly by dropping your prices that much. I think this one has more negatives than positives, but I do want to tell you it in case this works for you. If you're selling your work and you're like, I don't have time to do the research for the materials and the time, this might work out for you. You might just be like, here's the price, and then they take their painting and everyone's happy. One of the cons is the pricing you put out can really vary a lot between really complex smaller works versus less complex bigger works, or things that have a lot of similarity, but you might have priced one at $95 and another one at $150, and you're just like, they're basically the same size, basically the same image. Why is it so different? And you can't answer that. It was just going off your gut. Your emotional influence is really going to dictate what's going on here. So if you're having a bad day, but you also have to price your artwork for a show, that's going to influence you. It's going to influence your costs. It's going to influence everything you're doing, and it's going to be a worse day. Lastly, with intuition-based pricing, it's hard to see your growth if you keep picking prices based on your intuition. It's hard to see how things have moved up over the years or down over the years, and it's hard to see the big picture of what's going on with your artwork. Finally, we're going to get into the pricing structure that I'm currently using, and I've been using for the last 4 years. This is a system I had to make out of necessity versus someone telling me about it, but there's a lot of flexibility here that I think you're really going to like. You should try this one out. At the time I came up with this, I was still selling prints on Etsy and also my website, and I kept running into a problem. And the problem was that my website and Etsy had very different cuts that they took from the sales of my prints. I needed a spreadsheet. I needed a really good spreadsheet, so I made one. And in a second, I'm going to show you the spreadsheet. I went around to a bunch of people's websites and who sold prints. I was like, these are artists I admire. I like the quality of their work. How are they doing this? And I saw a lot of patterns, and I saw a lot of randomness or patterns I couldn't figure out. Some people had pricing that made a lot of sense when it came to prints. I decided to make this spreadsheet, and I made a category for every single item that I was selling. I had my matte prints, my tote bags, I had framed prints, I had canvas prints, like every single thing that I sold went on the spreadsheet. I used Printful, so I found their base price, and then I made a column with that, and then I made another column of their shipping price for the farthest distance in the world that I could ship things. Then I made rows for every size difference that I could have along those columns. I made sections for how much Etsy was taking, I made sections for how much I could afford a discount, and the percentage of the profit I was going to expect for each item. After all that, I made a base price, and I did a price per square inch. I've been using this for 4 years, and it really works well. First, I started with 50 cents as the price per square inch until I got the percentage of profit to get over 20%. It ended up being $2 per square inch. Price per square inch covers the cost of shipping. It covers the cost that my third-party printers take. It covers the cost of my website, of marketing, of photographers. It covers the cost of everything. And I know that if I give a discount code of 10%, how much it'll be and how much it'll take out of my profit at the end. When I sell an 8 by 10 inch print, I'm making 37% profit of that sale price. When I sell a 24 by 36 inch print, I'm making a 86% profit of that sale price. There are miscellaneous costs that are included in here, like I just listed, like the website fees and the photographer and stuff like that. All of these get absorbed by the profit margin. I liked this system for print so much that I moved it over to my painting. Selling my original art as a price per square inch has made the biggest difference for my work, and I do have a couple of downsides to it, so it's not all like rainbows and sunshine over here, but I like the flexibility it's given me. I've been using a sliding scale. My price per square inch is $2.35 if it's 8 inches or smaller. If it's 12 inches or smaller, it goes down to $1.80 per square inch. If it's 13 inches or bigger, it goes down to $1.60 per square inch. All of my paintings start at $150. This goes for my original paintings and also my commissions, and they go up based on size. I do the sliding scale because at certain sizes the price seems too high. I'll give you an example. If I did a 10 by 10 inch painting, my standard price is $180. If I did an 18 by 24 inch painting, it would cost $691. A 3 by 4 foot painting would cost $2,764. If I were to have it all at $2.35 a square inch, the 3 by 4 foot painting would cost $4,060. That's way too high. The key to doing this is making sure that your profit of percentage is at least 30% or higher. That way you can have a discount, that way you can have an oops, that way you can handle a return and still be in the clear. I also sell commissions as one of my art umbrella sales. I raise my prices by a couple of cents per square inch for commissions. I do this because I'm working with someone else's ideas and for a more constricted time frame. My price per square inch for a commission is $2.35 for 8 inches or smaller. That stays the same. But for 12 inches or bigger, I go up to $2. And for work that's over 13 inches in any direction, I go to $1.70 per square inch. The comparative pricing is a painting that is 10 by 10 inches is now $200, a 18 by 24 is $734, and a 36 by 48 is now $2,937 for that commission price. Again, these prices include shipping. They include taking the work to get photographed. They include my many years of experience, all of my materials, and all the bills it takes to keep the lights on. In January, I tend to raise my prices by a couple cents per square inch. It's really easy. I just change my little spreadsheet and all the numbers go up automatically. It's perfect. The pros and cons of this. It's very easy to give estimates to collectors. It's very easy to sell my commission prices. It's so simple. I just think, okay, what's the size? Here's the price. The prices always feel fair to me and they always feel competitive. It's really scalable. I can raise the size and reduce the price just a little bit by having that change in price per square inch depending on size. It allows for really easy adjustments if I have add-ons like gold leaf. It's so easy to calculate. It's so simple. I'm not worried about how much of each paint tube I'm using. I'm just thinking, how big is the painting? Here we go. The cons are the bigger paintings can feel too expensive if you don't do the sliding scale part of the price per square inch. It doesn't really account for complexity. Say you have two paintings that are 18 by 24, but one is really complex and took you twice as long to make. It doesn't really account for that. So that's something you'll have to think about. How many hours am I putting into this, and is it worth my time to put into it? You might feel constrained in a way with this pricing system. You might feel like, oh, I need to stick to an 18 by 24 because my clients can't afford a higher price painting. Like, my collectors are not there. My collectors are in a smaller scale, smaller price range sort of market. And that's something you have to think about. Your smaller pieces with high complexity might feel undervalued. For my work, for my abstract geometric artwork, this system works really well for me, and that's because I've tried 3 other systems. Let's talk about sales really quick. I don't do sales very often, but I do offer a discount to my email subscribers basically all the time. I give them a 10% off code that they can use on my online shop. Studio sales are something I run every few years. I don't do holiday sales very often. My prices stay really, really consistent. When I do have a sale, it's a big deal. I'm putting out lots of marketing, I'm doing lots of things because I'm trying to get more buyers in to make up for the prices I'm giving out. I don't recommend doing a lot of sales all the time. That's something you have to work with your art. Okay, now let's talk about shipping. When you're doing your pricing for your artwork, you also need to think about shipping. And I really like including my shipping prices within my painting prices. If I'm selling an original painting, I'm selling a commission, unless it's huge and also I'm selling it international, I include the shipping price within the painting price. Now you might be thinking, okay, but what if I'm selling my work online and then I go to an art show and I'm selling the work there? Do I drop my prices? And the answer is no. If you end up selling the painting that has the shipping price included into the full price, you're going to take that margin that would have gone to shipping and add it to a different bill that you probably have. You're just going to keep the prices really consistent. I've experienced this thing multiple times, and there's truly just nothing worse. Going to a market and seeing some beautiful pottery piece or a painting that I really like, and then I go to their website and the price is cheaper or more expensive on the website, and just being like confused or disappointed because the price is so different. Don't be that person. Try and keep your prices for the things really similar, unless you're doing a whole raise of prices at the beginning of the year as like an inflation raise. Keeping your prices similar and the same across platforms, so across shops, is going to make you seem more reliable and more dependable and just more worthy of buying from. At this point, you might have already chosen what pricing scale that you're really interested in, but if you are still thinking none of these are right, I have 4 more for you that I have not personally tested out, but I'm going to read them to you because I think they're interesting and they might work for your style of art. Edition-based pricing. So edition-based pricing is when you have multiples of something. This is really great for people who do silkscreen prints or do a series of a couple of paintings that are all similar sizes or something like that. Edition-based pricing is when you have something that is limited edition versus open edition. I don't sell limited edition prints. I sell open-based prints. And say you had a print run of 20 prints and they're all hand signed and they're numbered, those would be more expensive than an open-based print where you could just make another of that image at any time. When you have another of that image at any time, the initial price point of the print goes down because it's less valuable because you've made another. Does that make sense? So if you have your first print and you've sold it for $20, but you're like, oh, I can make another print and sell it to somebody else because someone else wants it, and you would sell that one for maybe $20, but really it would be valued a little bit less because it's less exclusive. You do this times 200 and, you know, that's not as valuable. It's still cool, it's still a piece of art, but the price isn't going to be as high. Versus limited edition, where there's only 20 ever made, that becomes a rarity. The pros of this is that you can have this really cool like exclusivity thing going on, but the cons is you have to manage inventory. And I don't know about you, I hate having inventory in my studio. I'm like, please get out into the planet. So so I don't do this kind of pricing. Subscription-based models are really interesting and something I think I want to try sometime. We're talking like a Patreon, we're talking about a print club, or something similar where your collectors will pay you a set amount each month and then you give them something each month instead. I have a friend who does a print club, and each month she gets paid $10, and every 3 months a print goes out to that person. That way they're getting a $30 value every 3 months. It's like once a quarter. It works out. I subscribe to a candle maker every quarter, and I get a box worth of $40 of goods, and it makes my house smell good, and that's fun. This gets tricky when it comes to making originals of something because there's only one, and how are you going to divide that up through many people? I don't know, but it's an option, subscription-based. Another example of this being successful is poetry clubs or postcard clubs, where you subscribe to an artist for $5 or $10 a month, and each month you get a new postcard print of their work or a poem straight to your mailbox. They're very cute and they're very fun. I like the idea. Okay, the next one is portfolio pricing. Portfolio pricing is when you look at your whole body of work and price it in relationship to itself. So this is really good for people who have buyers who like getting many pieces of a collection of work. So you have 20 pieces of art and it's all for one show, and it's very distinctly one set of work. This is less good if you're a beginner and you've only made maybe like 4 pieces of artwork and they're all very distinctive from each other, and they don't necessarily look good next to each other except for the fact that you made them. This is definitely for the more established artist. Can justify a higher price point because you have more experience and you probably have a gallery to host you, so there's that. The last pricing structure I have is the most unusual, and I've never tried it myself, so you'll have to take this with a grain of salt here, but it's crowdsourcing. Essentially, to price your work, you're going to ask people who you trust to help you come up with the price. You're going to maybe post your finished piece to a Discord group and be like, how much do you think this is worth, right? You give the details, you're like, this is the size, the medium, the description for the painting, and people start throwing out numbers and you pick something based off of other people's feedback. This seems like a lot of work to do all the time, and you can get some bad actors in there trying to undermine you for some reason or another, because people are like that occasionally. Crowdsourcing is interesting. I don't know if I'd go for it, but it could lead to good results. You could also have something that's kind of under this umbrella of crowdsourcing, where you do a pay what you want sort of pricing, where you put out your item onto the internet, say, onto your store, and you say, here's the minimum suggested price. And you say, maybe this is like $40 for an 8x10 painting. But then you say, pay what you want. And with this, you rely on the generosity and the value that other people want to give you for your painting. This is tricky because some people might really love your work and they might give you way over your minimum price. Say they give you $200 for your 8x10-inch painting, but some people want things for as cheap as they can, so they're going to pay the $40 that you've suggested on the site, and then you have to give them the painting as that. It depends on the vibes you've cultivated around your artwork, and this might be successful, this might not be successful. I I've never tried it. Let me know if you've tried it, and maybe it's worth pursuing. Choosing the right pricing structure is really about what your goals are, what your personal style is like, and also what the market's doing. You have to do your research here. It can be frustrating to pick something, but it could also be kind of fun. And whenever I think of my pricing structure that I'm currently using, the price per square inch, I kind of get excited about it. I'm just like, oh yeah, and then if this happens, then this happens, and it's like cascading numbers, but that's just me. Overall, you should test things out and experiment what works for you and what doesn't. If you're still struggling to figure out what pricing structure you should do, I've got a list of questions in the description that I think you should read out and try to answer for yourself. I think it'll help you pick something and get you in the right direction at least. If you want to talk about pricing your art and you have more questions, leave a comment. I will respond and we can chat about how to price things better and see what will work for you. Good luck, friends. I hope you sell out. Make good choices, and see you next time. Goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.